Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and today I want to talk to you about Guild Wars 2. We've covered a lot of MMOs here on the channel in the last few years, and one MMO that I played as a kid was Guild Wars. At its launch, myself and Josh played Guild Wars 2 together, forming a guild and mainly doing PvP. Today, Guild Wars 2 is about to get its newest expansion, End of Dragons, and it's been a long time since we played the game, so we were considering trying it and maybe making some videos, returning after all this time on February 28th. And amazingly, we were contacted to create some sponsor content for End of Dragons and to have a chance to play the game early for a 90-minute session with some of the Guild Wars team. So I'm happy to say that this video is sponsored by Guild Wars 2, and a thank you to them for giving me a chance to try the expansion early. After that session, I found myself quite nostalgic for Guild Wars. We were playing in Cantha, a region key during Guild Wars 1, and now we're returning to it lore-wise hundreds of years later. Gameplay-wise, it still felt very fluid and good to me, that combat, but I was particularly impressed by some of the features that feel very innovating for the MMO genre that I missed during my time away from the game. So I decided to do a little research about End of Dragons alongside my own early experience to make this video on 10 things that you want to know before playing End of Dragons. Starting with number 1 then, the 9 new elite specializations for all of the classes of Guild Wars. Each class, called professions in this game, will assign you one of the 3 armor types alongside skills and traits based on that class. What's really nice is that any race and any gender can pick any of the classes, so there's no annoying limiters there. And after you pick your class, that becomes your permanent class. But when you hit 80, you get to train one of the elite specializations, which becomes and changes the core of your class. These new elite specs in End of Dragons have new concepts and designs that are meant to mix up the gameplay a bit. It's been interesting to see the community reaction to these individually for each spec on the various trailers they released. It seems some of these specs have been called out for by the community for a while, and now it's finally happening. For example, the class I was playing in the early access event was the Ranger. You have specs like the Druid and the Soul Beast right now, which do provide some kinds of transformation and beast mode abilities, but Untamed is more about your pet specifically, as well as being quite nature-based. Things like creepy spore-based abilities, cages of nature, and most importantly, a power boost to you and your pet. It looks like people were excited to see a more Beastmaster design for the Ranger gameplay, but personally I was more interested in the mutating nature aspect. Coming back after all this time for me though, it's going to be interesting to choose between all of the classes and their specs, as well as the talent choices inside of that do change the playstyle even more. So it seems like there's going to be a huge amount of choice when it comes to crafting a personal build and playstyle. Speaking of which then, for number 2, I want to talk about combat design as a whole. In Guild Wars, it's more actual physical combat. Let me explain. Your attacks actually need to land on your target. They take up a physical space, so if you're swinging your sword around using your abilities, slamming your head on your keyboard, it doesn't mean anything if you're not actually upon your target, if you're not physically colliding with it. That means that you aren't hoping for numbers to decide if, yeah, okay, you landed that attack or you didn't. It's literally, you must land the blow physically. And then obviously you've got the weapon swapping. You have 5 abilities to be bound for each weapon, and then you can have 2 weapons equipped at any one time to swap between them. Each weapon serves a different purpose and comes with different abilities you can choose between. And it goes beyond that too. So I'm using an axe and a sword. I'm dual wielding on my Ranger. Certain abilities require a weapon to either be in the main hand or the offhand. So with my axe, if I actually had that in my main hand, I'd have access to different abilities because of that. The Ranger currently has 10 weapons to choose between, and like I say, each has its own abilities and purpose, but then in End of Dragons, it's also going to get the hammer, so an 11th weapon to choose. The class itself has various healing skills to pick between, command skills, signet skills, spirit summons, survival and trap options, and then also eventually the elite abilities. And you only have a few slots to actually assign them to, so this makes me think one Ranger is likely going to be radically different from the next. I think that's very cool. Alright, just want to talk about story for a second for number 3 then. For me, I played the original Guild Wars as a kid, right? So it's a bit of a blur, but it's still exciting for me to find out we're actually going to an area from that game. This region, Cantha, was a main region for the first expansion of Guild Wars 1, and we're going to be playing it a few hundred years after those events in Guild Wars 2. So we're going to see familiar names like the Jade Brotherhood, but also with major changes to like who they are and what they do now. And that's largely because of the Jade technology that now exists here that's turned the Cantha Empire into sort of a super powerful civilization. So not only will you experience this region and story as a new player and be fine, you know, going on and understanding it as it's explained, the OG players are gonna get to see a lot of references and details to actually appreciate. Going through that session with some of the Guild Wars team, they were giving us like so much interesting context to what we were doing, like how the Jade Brotherhood has been set up here and how they're doing some dark things to the population out in these wilds. Alright, so for number 4, this is an exciting one for me. We're talking about mounts. If you're unaware, Guild Wars 2 is often claimed to be one of the best MMOs for mounts in general, because they're apparently a lot more than generic transport. Each mount essentially serves a different form of traversal. Some mounts can leap up and bound over terrain that would otherwise be unpassable. Some mounts can fly and glide around, using the momentum to stay in the air. There is this ridiculous rolling mount I tried, where I could basically break the sound barrier zooming around downhill, where I nearly accidentally killed myself. The point is, each mount has its own abilities and passive mechanics, and therefore purpose. You'd want to pull out a specific mount for a specific reason, compared to just blindly riding any mount for basically the same purpose in other games. And obviously there's an entirely new mount as well here, the Siege Turtle. This is apparently their first full combat mount, as well as it's being a 2-person mount. We had the chance to try these out early in the session, and we were told that you actually normally need to raise your turtle for war instead of just being given it flat out, but they're extremely effective. For clearing these massive packs of enemies in these big events we were doing, the pilot can leap and hover around and then slam down on enemies, while the gunner can shoot the cannons or buff up the turtle. So yeah, from a very short test with these, the mount design is very unique in the MMO scene, and I really hope we see other games inspired by this. Speaking of events though, let's talk about that. During my short 90 minutes of play in this early session, we were doing a few special events as a group. Huge battles that required a large group of players out in the open world. Our very first task was to take the land suited to our guild hall as a 16-man team once we joined a guild together beforehand. We had to defeat the various leaders, which functioned as boss fights designed to fight and challenge a big group of players. Lots of telegraphed abilities to leap out of for both melee and ranged. The turtle siege we played later on had us attacking the Jade Brotherhood in a research facility that was filled with an army of enemies. We needed to use the siege turtles to break the barrier of the walls to even get inside, and then inside there were mini bosses, which were mutated beasts freed from the cells down below, or the supercomputer at the heart of it all. We were barely able to overcome these things as a 16-man team, so I assume these events are meant to be done with a large amount of players that have to work together. And this open world event design seems to encourage players to do that, to group together and work together. That brings me to number 6. Fishing. I know, strange transition, but hear me out. A new feature in End of Dragons is fishing, which is pretty funny to think about. You know, that's seen as a standard thing in games at this point, and it's a big feature in this expansion, but I'll tell you why. It's not just generic fishing, it would seem. They're creating a reason for players to spend together through it. We were brought to the Seitung province, which was an island north of where we were taking the guild hall, and introduced to a fishing competition. Just catch as many fish as you can compared to the others. But that's when we were shown the skiffs. These are little boats that you can ride with lots of people at once, taking us from just standing around at a shore or dock to fish, but going out on the water to fish directly. The driver could boost the boat to get us around quicker, while passengers can do various emotes to encourage the driver, letting him boost again faster. This is simple conceptually, right? But I think an important philosophy that I was getting from the team throughout this session. They really want to give you more reasons to play together, whether that's the events or literally just fishing. If you fish with friends, you actually have better odds at getting rare catches, and you can travel around faster together, you get to your target location faster, so you're encouraged to spend time together in what would otherwise be just a mini-game feature. That's why I found the way the events were working particularly interesting. It was this intentional choice to try to bring players together, compared to many MMOs these days, kind of emphasizing convenience, cutting away at the social aspects of an MMO. I wasn't able to try the fishing myself in the play session, but I do know, of course, you can have a fishing rod and you can have both baits and lures to use, and I'm interested to see how the mechanics of fishing do work in play. Number 7 then is to do with Jade tech. A major aspect of Cantha is the technological advancement over the last few hundred years in this area, and we've been shown various mechanics in the trailers using that tech to improve our quality of life. The main feature being the Jade bot, which will function as a companion that we all get, whatever class you are, serving different useful purposes. The trailer explained that we'll use it to speed the skiffs, right? Or energize our other mounts for better effect. It'll scavenge for you, it'll recycle items, it's got other features too. But as we upgrade it, it'll get more options that are particularly useful, like specifically quickly reviving a downed player who would normally need a manual revive. It also seems key to some of the new transportation we've seen in some of the trailers. So while we don't know the full extent of what this Jade bot can actually do, it seems like a really important companion that you want to get and you want to upgrade as soon as possible. Alright, so for my last few points on things I want you to know about Guild Wars 2 and End of Dragons, let's talk more big picture. Firstly, character progression and the anti-grind design of this game. Something I was extremely pleased to hear about when I was researching the current state of the game is the anti-grind design. In a lot of MMOs, it's a constant battle to upkeep your character and keep your gear relevant. It's rarely the case that I'll get something that's best in slot and then that be true even a month or two later. Character progression is important, right? But it doesn't have to come in form of parasitic design that forces your previous work to be all but irrelevant. In Guild Wars 2, the power level is literally capped, meaning the gear you work to achieve will be relevant when you come back after a break. You won't have massively fallen behind because you stopped playing every day that week. My understanding is there's other forms of progression, like the gear sets. You use different gear to create different builds and playstyles, so your character is more versatile in any one situation. Your actual skill then becomes core to your progression. You're not held by what you're wearing, you're held by your own gameplay. That's a breath of fresh air. Number 9 continues that as well though. This is about monetization of Guild Wars 2. It's been a long time for me and I was wondering what happened with this game in this regard. To little shock, I learned they have a shop in-game that sells skins to make money. However, digging deeper, I found this to be one of the most reasonable monetization methods I've seen in any MMO. If you aren't aware, Guild Wars 2 does not have a monthly subscription. You pay for the content, like the expansions, and then those are yours forever to play whenever you want. As of now, there's a free model in which you can play the game in its original state with very few limits, like not being able to enter the main city until level 35 or exit a starting zone before you're level 10. But these things are mainly meant to block gold sellers. If you find you've enjoyed the base game and want to get the rest of it, like the first 2 expansions, they're sold in a bundle for about $30. And again, once you bought it, it's yours forever. That's $30 for what should be in an MMO like this, hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of content with no subscription fee. That's very kind. But then you've got the new expansion, right? End of Dragons. That's also about $30. I see MMO expansions that are brand new sold for double that, and then they come with sub fees as the standard. This is ridiculous. So I would imagine the shop would be really bad, right? Because they need to make money. No, it's actually very kind to a player who doesn't want to spend money on it. You can convert your gold, currency you earn playing the game, into store gems and then buy anything in the store. So if there's a cool skin, you can play the game, get gold, convert it to gems, and get the skin. This is a very fair system in my eyes, and certainly one of the best payment models I've seen in a current MMO. Lastly, for number 10 then, on things I want you to know for Guild Wars 2, End of Dragons specifically, is relax. Compared to some MMOs I've played recently, I get the strong sensation that the design choice of this game and this expansion is not to rush you through it and try to squeeze you to play it all the time. There's the anti-grind design, where you don't have to play every day to stay relevant, the store being cosmetic based, you aren't having to fight to keep up with whales buying power, and with the big additions to the content in this expansion, you can have a lot to explore at your own pace. I was worried that I simply wouldn't have time for this expansion, especially when we were contacted to try to make some videos for it. I thought we wouldn't be able to manage it. After learning more about the game and these design choices though, I know now I don't need to go crazy. I can take the game at my own pace and still have a good experience. So that's what I plan to do, and I advise you keep that in mind for yourself. But that's it, the 10 things I want to talk about in regards to End of Dragons and Guild Wars 2 as a whole. I made a whole video about my experience from playing the expansion early, if you want to check that out as well. But let me know your thoughts, and if you have any advice for me as a returning player who feels very new again, drop it in the comments. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.